podcast from Apathetic Enthusiasm.
Coming to you live from a frog teaching young kids how to build tents. It's part of some kind of Boy Scout thing, but they're frogs and they are large. It's kind of cool, but mostly uncomfortable. But good news, we're talking about Interdimensional IRSS, the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast. Also, there's like a Freaky Friday kind of thing. It's a whole thing.
Is the Freaky Friday with the frogs? Like, are you switching minds with the frog?
No. I think the frogs and the Boy Scouts are switching minds.
They're frog scouts. Like,
yeah.
Let's call them what they are. They're frog scouts.
They're frog scouts. Like the Boy Scouts, like lightning struck, and then they switched their brains with
and they only have 3 days to
Uh-huh.
do some sort of thing. Otherwise, they'll be stuck as frog scouts forever. Hello, everybody. I'm Travis.
Hey everybody, I'm Brandon, and welcome to Interdimensional IRSS. Of course, this is the unofficial Rick and Morty podcast. We love that you are here to listen to us. We love that you're here to talk about the show with us in its 7th season, going to go into its 2nd episode of the 7th season. We can't be more excited. We can't
believe it. Already 2 episodes in. I feel like we just started. Like we just got here, and we already have 2 episodes done.
That's right.
It's
yeah.
unbelievable. It's
I feel
astounding.
like your math is solid. You are a solid math episode matician.
I can definitely count to 2 before I have to take my shoes off. Anyway, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new, hit the subscribe button, do all of those things. If you want to follow us on socials, you could do that on Twitter/X. At Rick and Morty Pod. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Rick and Morty Podcast. Instagram, Rick and Morty Pod or Rick and Morty Podcast. Really, pick either one. We have them both now. Email rickandmortypodcast@gmail.com. We're on Threads. You could do that. We really don't post on there. But we are on the subreddits. So if you want to go to the official Rick and Morty subreddit, rickandmorty.reddit.com, where if you are an avid follower of the subreddit, you may catch an early access to like a cold open or something, Brandon?
Cold
how does
open.
that work?
Yeah, maybe it's like a cold open or something like that. I don't know, Travis. How does that work? No,
I don't know. On a hot summer day, I like to sit back and relax with a nice cold open.
Yeah, head over to the subreddit every Friday by noon Pacific Standard Time or Pacific Time. It doesn't have to be Standard Time. It could be it's just Pacific Time, whatever that time is at that time. You can find the cold open for that week's episode of Rick and Morty every Friday, as long as the season.
It's the only place to get it. So make sure you're heading over to the Reddit. You could also spend some time on our subreddit, which is Rick and Morty Podcast.reddit.com. Hang out. Let us know what you think about the episode. We'd love to see you there. Our website, rickandmortypod.com. Catch episodes, all of our past episodes. You can also catch video versions of this podcast, as well as all of our other podcasts over on YouTube, youtube.com/apathetic enthusiasm. Finally, big shout out to our patrons over at patreon.com/apathetic enthusiasm. Thank you for supporting our show. And, I hope you're enjoying the post shows. If you're a patron and you haven't been there in a while, check out the exclusive post shows that you can only watch over on Patreon. We talk about all sorts of things. It gets loose, it gets wild in the post show. There's no rules. Mostly we talk about 3D printing and fantasy football. But anyway,
it's fun. You have a blast.
We have a good time.
All the topics that you really, really love, and you're like, I wish they'd talk about this instead of Rick and Morty, the thing I'm actually interested in listening to them podcast about. I do want to throw a shout out to old Philip Marks who shot me a Blue Sky invite, and so if you are so inclined, you can follow us over at something Rick and Morty Pod over on Blue Sky. They have like complicated links there. We do have
figure it out. Yeah, we're not.
Yeah, but just like anything else, don't expect us to interact with you too much. But if you send me something, I'll probably respond to you. So that's great.
There's a high probability of that happening. All right. Without any further ado, either you just got done watching the 2nd episode, or maybe you watched it last night, and the first thing you want to do is throw on a podcast and listen to our thoughts about it. We're so glad you're here. And the only thing standing between you and our thoughts on the episode is a segment we like to call Semi-Pertinent News.
Semi-pertinent news. Semi-pertinent news. You know, if you do the lighter enough, it starts to get you like a little bit of a callus on your thumb.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. It
hurts.
hot.
Yeah.
It gets
Yeah.
uncomfortable, and your physician will be like, "Don't do that, Brandon."
Yeah, it's not safe. Pyrotechnics on this podcast, we're not authorized.
Yeah, as such, it's such a right now. It's like it's blistering a little bit, and I would show it to you live on camera, Travis, and I would show it to our listeners on audio if you go to Rick and Morty Pod on X. Just kidding. It's not blistering, but it does hurt significantly. Okay. Anyways,
I'm
Travis,
sorry to hear that, Brandon.
lead us.
As you know, if you are an avid listener of this podcast, we recorded our season premiere episode a little early. We actually recorded it in advance of the season premiere, released it. Hopefully, you've gotten to listen to that episode. But there's important news that has come out since the recording of that episode, and that is.
Oh my gosh, Travis! Before you say what you're gonna say, I just want to say, click. Actual pertinent news, because this is very, 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 very pertinent to
So pertinent.
the show that we're talking about, Rick and Morty. Go ahead. I just wanted to introduce that concept for you to now announce what you're going to announce.
I mean, it's the same news. It didn't change because you changed the title.
No, but it's not semi-pertinent. Notice
It's incredibly pertinent. It's incredibly pertinent. And that is, of course, that a week ago, by the time you're listening to this, the new voice actors who are taking on the title characters, Rick and Morty, have officially been announced. They have names. They're credited. We know who they are. Of course, I'm talking about Ian Cardoni, who voices Rick, and Harry Belden, who voices Morty.
Yep.
Before we even really saw, like, I don't know, the most of the information that I have about these individuals comes out of a Hollywood Reporter article that is linked in the show notes, but it's called "How Rick and Morty Cast Its New Voice Stars," and this is a good interview that is with co-creator Dan Harmon, as well as Rick and Morty showrunner Scott Marder, and they talk a little bit about the process they went through to hire these new writers, what is different with having two people play the characters instead of just one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't know, my computer is wigging out there for a second.
Two characters instead of one. They mentioned in that interview, because the thing is with disgraced show co-creator Justin Roiland, he was doing both voices, and one of the things they talked about in the article is they saw how it wore on Roiland having to do both voices for all that stuff. So they really just wanted to get two different voice actors to do Rick and Morty, to ease both of their voices. So I thought that was interesting, because the registers between the two characters is different, and to have to do that to basically double up your workload in order to do those voices, that makes sense. There was another point of the article that I thought was really interesting, which I pointed out to you, Travis, which is they for the season premiere, it sounds like it was already recorded, that there was already at least a good amount of work done for the season premiere, and that the Ian and Harry had to go back and re-record a bunch of stuff, and that includes a Mr. Poopy Butthole, who I think John Allen, I think is the name, David Allen or John Allen. So a third voice actor to do Mr. Poopy Butthole. And so like the thought of that was, well, they're already because they're already coming in, they're doing significant rework. We don't want to also have them do poopy butthole on top of all that type of
Yeah.
stuff. So I thought that was interesting. It kind of goes back to a thought that we had that maybe they had to re-record some stuff with the new voice actors, and so that's kind of a soft confirmation anyway.
And a lot of this kind of is even more complicated by the fact that there was both a writer's strike and, more importantly, the SAG-AFTRA strike that is still ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, these two individuals, Ian and Harry, have not done any interviews yet because they're holding true to the rules of the strike. So I wonder if that's part of the reason that they've kind of kept the names secret as well up until the point when they actually release the episode. I'm sure these guys are getting a lot of attention right now from folks kind of reaching out. But obviously, and I'm sure.
It's you? Oh, Ian! Oh my God! You're the one. You're the new voice. Like, Harry, come on, man! Why didn't you tell me?
And relatively young guys that are
unknown,
pretty unknown to the industry, and that's one of the things that Dan and Scott talk about in the interview as well is the freshness that they're going to bring to these characters actually expands potentially the length that the show can go on, right? Like that they are starting fresh and within the 7th season and could potentially extend the show even longer. So yeah, I don't know, really interesting. If you want to catch the full article, again, the link will be in the show notes, but lots of good information about how they became part of the show and the process and how many different auditions they had to go through to kind of find the right fit. But yeah, I don't know, for me, looking back on the last week and looking at the fan response to the new voices, I feel like for the most part it has been overwhelmingly positive. I think there are some folks that have reached out to me directly and been like, Mr. Poopy Butthole didn't feel right to me, or have some nagging thoughts about it. But now that we're 2 episodes in, and me rewatching the shows multiple times for the sake of this podcast, I feel like I've watched a whole season of Rick and Morty already with the new voice actors. I'm very used to them, like, already. Yeah. I will say Morty less featured so far within the first 2 episodes, but for the most part, what we've gotten of Rick, I'm kind of used to it. I don't feel a significant difference.
We talked about this leading up to the new season, any of the promos, where we're like, well, I mean, the voices have obviously shifted from the first season to now, and I would argue that if nobody knew anything about Roiland, if nobody knew anything about the voice changes at all, they would go into this new season and be like, the voice sounds a little bit different. Okay. And moving on, because to me the voices are that close, and they are that different from like season 1 to season 5 that it's not that much of a leap, honestly. I think the poopy butthole maybe is the one that does stand out the most.
Sure.
But even on Reddit, like, folks have been like, it's less annoying.
Sure.
But I think people would notice more of they'll notice more of like the screechy, high pitched ones than they will Rick and Morty, because I think there's a lot of people who capture that aspect of them pretty closely.
Yeah, I agree. It takes me back to that conversation that we overheard at Comic-Con over the summer, where someone assumed that they had replaced the voice actors like 2 seasons ago. For that level of viewer, they probably won't notice much of a difference at all.
That's right.
So anyway, if you want to check out the full article, highly recommend you do so. And as soon as we are able to talk to any of the people that we just mentioned, whether that be voice actors, Dan Harmon himself, Scott Martyr again, just, we'll let you know. We'll let you know when we can talk to them a little bit more.
Tell you what, you'll be the first to know, because you'll hear it.
Yeah,
live
that's
or
how it works.
recorded. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
any other news that I wasn't tracking, Brandon? Because I felt like that was the major thing. To
yeah,
discuss
yeah,
this
yeah.
week.
I am playing Cyberpunk again, so that's good.
Oh, interesting.
But
Okay.
other than that, no. There's Vampire Hunters is a multiplayer now, so that's cool.
Far
But no,
less pertinent. Yeah.
the Vampire Survivors, sorry. But as far as the Dan Harmon social media minute, there's no
Yeah.
news.
No news. No posts. He has given us no posts. His posting schedule was infrequent at best in the off season. He has not changed that for season 7. So, no Dan Harmon social media minute, which means we've gotten through all of our semi-pertinent news. And when we come back, it'll be time for us to get into all the details from this latest episode. So stick around, and we will be right back. All right, here we go. It is now time for the reason that you downloaded and or streamed this podcast in the first place. It is time for a segment we like to call the main thing.
Main thing. Main thing. Welcome to the main thing.
You really sold it at the end there, bud.
That's right. It's the main thing where we talk about the actual main topic of today's episode, which is Steven.
His name is Steven Seagal.
Steven Evan Episode Oob. Season 7, Episode 2, The Jerrick Trap. That's right. Air date 2023, October 22nd. We forgot to grab the written by and directed by. Sorry, everybody. That's okay. But
do you have that? I don't have that. Do you have that yet?
No. And here's why, Travis, is because normally what we do, we're recording for everyone's knowledge. We're recording this on a Thursday. Well, I get the update for who wrote and directed the episode on Friday. So we don't actually have that information yet. And yes,
Travis is going out of town this weekend. We had to get ahead of things. Things will be back to normal next week.
I am doing the Homer sotto voce. It's loud whispering. Anyway, so we don't have that information. Sorry,
Kudos to the amazing people that wrote and directed this episode. We know you're amazing and fantastic, and thank you for all of your hard work.
100%. The Bronopsis, Travis. Why don't you take the Bronopsis for us?
Gotta be mindful, bruh. Big brain stuff here.
Woo! And let me translate that for you, everyone, with our synopsis. Mind brain scramble is no problem for burger and fries.
That's right.
Oh yeah. Of course, the title references to the Parent Trap, the Jerrick Trap, the Parent Trap.
Yeah, I have. So I have to say, Brandon, as we get into this title reference,
yeah,
the topic of the Parent Trap, a highly controversial topic in my household.
Yeah,
because as you well know, there are two popular films by the name of The Parent Trap. The 1968 classic starring Haley Mills.
Of course.
And
Haley Mills, yeah.
the
She went on to
arguably
a successful Congress career.
Sure, obviously.
President.
Yes. And then the 1998 new classic with Lindsay Lohan.
Yeah.
And almost the exact same plot.
Right.
The Parent Trap. Now, Brandon, I have a couple of questions for you. First, have you seen one or both of these movies?
I have not seen either of them.
Oh my God.
But I generally know what they're about. They're about parents who are just too harsh on their young children, and their children rebel, and then they unleash a revolution that changes U.S. history for the better. I think get rid of the bourgeoisie, and it's like there's a whole thing with like games. They're
What
hungry.
are you talking about right now? Are you talking about the Hunger Games?
Okay, well, I didn't know that was the same movie, But okay, anyways,
Basic premise is there is a married couple that divorces, but they have twin baby children. So they divorce and decide to just each take one kid and never tell the kid that they have a twin sister until one summer they happen to be at the same summer camp. They realize that they're sisters and then switch places so that the one kid can meet their mom and the other kid can meet the dad, all with the idea that they're going to entrap their parents into getting back together, hence the Parent Trap.
Okay.
The important thing to notice about this is none of the base plot points of the Parent Trap have anything to do with this episode.
Yeah,
because this is much more of a Freaky Friday situation. Again, a set of Disney properties, one made in like the 60s or 70s, a later version made in the 90s. Definitely a Freaky Friday. They even reference it being a Freaky Friday throughout the episode. But I think like Jerry and Rick making the Jerrick trap, it rolls off the tongue as a better episode title.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I also want to point out the Vince Vaughn horror film Freaky, which is basically a play off of Freaky Friday, but where the young woman switches bodies with a serial killer, and the serial killer is then like killing in the body of a 16-year-old girl. So I just want to throw that out there.
It's a solid premise. It doesn't get old.
Girl.
There's so many applications for it.
So many applications. Anyway, okay, so that's the title references. Obviously, the Parent Trap. More of a Freaky Friday, though. Let's go ahead and talk
I want
about
comments, though. I want comments from the listeners. Which do you prefer, the 1968 Parent Trap or the 1998 Parent Trap? I'm gonna be having this conversation with my wife later, so I need to know.
Oh my
everybody
gosh.
in the comments. All right. The theme of this episode.
Please do, because Travis won't shut the hell up about it. All right. So the theme. Jerry, Rick. They're in the title. It's a huge theme for the whole episode. Is this relationship between Rick and Jerry? A little bit with the family. I think we can explore some of that stuff in a little bit. But first and foremost, it's this idea that Rick and Jerry, they pretend like they hate each other so much, but maybe there's something more there. Travis, you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting, and the setup for this episode was kind of like confusing for me. But when you get into the meat of the episode, where the shuffle has happened, and now the Rick is indistinguishable from the Jerry, and you don't end up with two versions of like it's Rick in one body, Jerry in another body. You really get like a blending of the two. It allows the parts of Rick that are coarse and sort of walled up and closed off to be more open. And it allows the qualities of Jerry, where he's not as smart, not as capable, those go away because he can play off Rick's, mental fortitude. But then he can bring his sort of free-flowing, relaxed attitude to the situation. And it allows them to kind of have conversations with each other about Rick and Jerry that they would have probably never had they maintained their whole consciousness, right? And so there's a couple lines in here that I think are really interesting when they're building the machine that will ultimately unscramble them. One, Rick admitting that when he yells at Jerry and calls him useless, he doesn't always mean it, right? I don't think that's something we would get Rick to say on his own. And that's followed with Jerry saying that when he calls Rick an angry asshole, he is the closest thing that Jerry has to a friend. And I think that vulnerability, that ability for them to share that with each other, it shows a significant amount of growth between these two characters. But I don't know, have you kind of seen any other do you feel like there's been growth and development between these characters over 7 seasons, or have they kind of sort of still ended up in that like father-in-law hatred versus like like superiority complex sort of situation?
Yeah, no, I think there's been growth. We've talked about it on various episodes throughout the last couple seasons, where there's been little moments where Rick has clearly cared about Jerry, and like with the fortune cookie episode, right? Like,
Yeah.
Jerry like, oh, you're my friend, and Rick's like, no, why'd you do that, you stupid fellow. But what I think more so is, instead of there being subtext for the viewer to be reading into those things,
Yeah.
this is a very direct kind of line for us to take in and say, okay, we don't have to read into subtext anymore. We have been seeing this growth. We have been seeing this improvement of the relationship over the last couple seasons. We don't have to imagine or hypothesize about it anymore. It's there in the text. They're saying it to each other, and it's an honest reflection of who they are, the Rick Jerry and the Jerry Rick, where they're like, yeah, we're being honest with each other a little bit. So, so I do think that that is just kind of an acknowledgement from the writers, and to say, yeah, like they do care about each other. Same thing with the Hellraiser episode.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like Rick felt bad about picking on Jerry so much, even with the Hellraiser, the Cenobites, right? So
Yeah, well, and I that kind of clues in a little bit on like the almost like that older sibling, younger sibling sort of situation where like, yeah, you can pick on your younger sibling all you want because that's your little brother or sister. But as soon as somebody else picks on them, now, no, that's not allowed, right? That's for me, and now I'm going to defend them. So yeah, maybe there's a little bit of that at play. It's just like that relationship has frustrations, and Rick doesn't always want to be bothered by Jerry's little, rake situations or things like that. But
I do.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention this thing, the observation I had, which is when the whole thing is they're switching. Like Rick wants to switch bodies, switch minds, and minds are tied to the body, and then that leads to some stuff we'll talk in our favorite bits. But eventually, there's this, in order to bring them back to life, it's like this kind of the Fly situation where they mix and match DNA, mix and match brain stuff, and so it's basically Jerry Rick in one body in Rick's body, and then Rick Jerry in Jerry's body. And when that situation is first kind of presented, very confusing, right? Because everything is done in Rick's voice, everything is done in Jerry's voice. But like the initial reaction for the Rick part of the brain is very antagonistic, very aggressive, is being like, "Shut up, I'm Rick, you dumb idiot." And then the other body saying, "No, I'm Rick, you dumb idiot." And then they're arguing, and they're arguing back and forth while they're on the phone with the gangster. I forget his name. Chuckles, yeah. And so I think that's interesting that the first reaction is like the most prominent, dominant part of the brain is that Rick. But once they start settling into it, once they start being like, okay, now we got through the initial reaction, we're not overreacting anymore, let's see what's going on. That's when they start being more Jerry-ish. Yeah. And they're like, oh, you know what? We don't have to be so pissed off. We're kind of like, let's just go with the flow. Let's be like Doofus Rick. Like we're hanging out at the Jerry Burium, right? Like Jerry Bury. It's fine. Gene has our rake. Let's check it out.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to me that it starts very aggressive, very like "Argh," to then like, actually, you know what? Let's just have fun. This is we're good. We're exploring our feet.
And that gets us ultimately to a point where they can no longer operate on their own, and they have to combine into the entity known as Jerrick or
Jerricky.
Jerricky, which Jerricky is arguably more powerful than Rick on his own,
Mm-hmm.
which leads me to believe that there are aspects of Jerry that, when added to Rick, make Rick more powerful.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Do you like
I
explaining to
not
somebody that is on the subreddit right now complaining about how useless Jerry is? How do you justify the fact that Jerricky is more powerful with the addition of Jerry?
Oh man, we're gonna get into like leadership and team dynamics here for
Yeah.
a second. Oh,
Yeah.
it's like it's I every person has their strengths and their weaknesses. Everybody has a strength, everybody has a weakness, right? And and my goal isn't to improve my weaknesses because what that does is ultimately weaken my strengths. My goal is to find those who complement my strengths with their strengths to overcome my weaknesses. So if I have a strength,
You crushed it. You just that was perfect. Okay.
that I mean that's the thing. I have strengths, you have strengths. Your strengths might be my weaknesses. I mean we're fucking look at this podcast for example. Like my lack of planning is a weakness. Like you have that as a strength. I have more of a let's fucking go with the flow. I don't even know what these show notes say right now. I'm going with the flow, right? But we're working together and we've
Yeah.
created something.
And you bring interesting other opinions, and you have this whole other source of knowledge to pull from. But I think that is really you nailed it when you said, not just improving on your weaknesses, but finding others that can bring their strengths to fill in those gaps. Jerry has strengths, and it's been shown throughout this show in different ways where Jerry can step up. And the things he's not great at a lot of things, and the things he's bad at, he's really bad at. But he does have some strengths, and when Jerricky is the synthesis of the best parts of both of them, yes, I think that is stronger than Rick on his own.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. Yeah.
Having fun, some emotional intelligence that Rick lacks, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole burger and fries thing is like that could be a little bit of Rick, right? Like Rick does like having fun, but he doesn't always let himself be super silly. Like doesn't let himself like be like goofy, right? Like the stuff with the Rick. I think the stuff with Gene and the rake when it comes back around, we're introduced to that in the beginning of the episode. Right towards the middle of the episode, they're like, "Yeah, oh, that's right, the rake. Oh, we forgot about the rake." And then they're like, "Oh, it'd be funny if we did like a holographic rake." And then he tries to grab it and he can't do it, right? And that kind of be like that kind of being the resolution for the episode too.
Just entertaining that idea.
Yeah,
Like Rick won't
I
even
hate
roll out from underneath the car to entertain an idea like that. Working together to build, a 3D like X-ray machine so they can identify the rake and all these
Yeah.
that is another situation where it takes both of them for that to become a possibility. So that is that I don't know, that's really interesting. I think it is a fun exploration in terms of an episode. To look at the strengths of both characters, and again that relationship between Jerry and Rick. Do I feel like in the future they're going to completely rewrite their interactions? No, I think that's part of why they had those lines in there about, when Rick is back in his body, he's going to act a certain way and Jerry's going to act a certain way as well. and we see it at the end of the episode when they're sitting at breakfast, right? They're back to their old selves. But I think it's still, enlightening for us as viewers to kind of understand what's happening below the surface within that relationship and what makes them tick. One other theme from this episode that we could touch on just for a minute is this idea of like brain privilege, and he talks about it mostly in the cold open. But it's this idea that we are smart because of our brain. Are we smart because of our brain, or because we like work to become smart? Rick is making an argument at the very beginning where he's saying you just think genius is random, but I was born crying and screaming just like everybody else, and then I became the smartest person in the world or in the universe. Don't throw that away. And he makes a very like clear statement about like the brain is hardware. I can put my mind in your brain and nothing's going to change. And then he immediately disproves this point. Like immediately. What did you think about how all that went down?
Yeah, I haven't been able to really parse through the philosophical thoughts that I have on that. Because realistically, from a science and physiology, anatomy perspective, I don't know if that's accurate, right? Like studying social sciences and psychology, like there's a whole nature versus nurture. I don't know. I have a hard time.
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think it's a little bit of both. I'm going to use it in terms of like computers, right? Like if you want to write a program on a computer, you can do that with a really old and not updated computer, or you can do that with like the top of the line fastest processors, tons of RAM, all that stuff, right? You could do it with a really strong piece of hardware, a really weak piece of hardware. You could probably write the same program, but how quickly you get to the answer, how quickly you get to a solution, how well it operates, you're going to have different levels of effectiveness. But given the same situation, you could probably get comparable things. It's a bad analogy when we're talking about brains, but
I think you triggered something in my brain, Travis, which is it's like when you go on Steam. For those who don't know, Steam is a marketplace where you can download a bunch of
everybody
games.
that listens to this podcast knows exactly what Steam is.
Okay, all right. So it's like if you
send us a note if you don't know what Steam is.
Steam. Travis, you have a PC. I don't have a PC right now. I have my MacBook, right? There are some games which that aren't compatible with Macintosh. Okay, so some of those games you can play it right away. You can download it. It goes into your PC. Maybe you have some configuration stuff you have to change, right? Like, my graphics card isn't that powerful. Oh, I don't have that much RAM. Okay, let me set the settings to medium instead of ultra max. Now that's yours, and it works fine for the most part. Like it's just download, cool, start it and run it. Whereas the MacBook, I'm like, oh, okay, it's not native to this operating system. What I can do though is I can download Windows, I can dual boot into a Windows environment, and then I can load the game up, and then I can play the game. But if I just download the game as it is, it's not going to play on my computer. I have to do a lot of working around and doing like a lot of half-ass shit to get it to work, and it's not going to work as well. So at the beginning of the episode, when Rick puts his mind into Jerry's brain, it's like downloading,
he downloaded Baldur's Gate to his MacBook. And it was a configuration nightmare.
Cyberpunk directly to the MacBook. It ain't working. It ain't working. And that's why Rick in Jerry's brain immediately shoots himself.
It's a very dark cold open, but it's very interesting, very to the point, pretty quickly. But I think it's really interesting because the first time I watched the episode, the brain swap, once like the brains were shuffled back together, it was super hard for me to understand what was happening at first.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I was like, so is Rick in this body and Jerry's in this one, or what's going on? Because like mid sentence, and this is a credit to the writing, that they would change persona in the middle of a statement. You're lucky I'm so smart that I even let you in Rick's garage or something, right? Like, like personifying both aspects of the characters in what they're saying. It's once you understand the idea of the episode, you can kind of get through that a little bit better. But it's very jarring at first. And I wonder if anybody else had issues with that, because it was weird for me the first time I watched it.
No. And you know, full disclosure. So we got the first 2 episodes. Again, we talked about this last week, but we got the first 2 episodes to screen. So we watched both episodes. This episode, I watched it the first time, and then going in to record the episode for episode 1, I was like, what's this second episode about, right? I was like trying to remember like what exactly happened, what were things going on, and part of that inability for me to like remember or like fully grasp what had happened was like because I was confused going through the episode the first time. Because I was confused and I didn't fully digest it or comprehend it, I didn't quite remember it. And so I wonder, for those folks who are watching the episode for the first time, maybe you didn't watch it a second time. Was that difficult for you?
Yeah.
Do you need to go back and watch it again? For me, maybe it's because maybe it's because we're old people. Maybe the answer is yes. We do need to watch it again, because there is
We've got aging hardware, as they say, Brandon.
It's in Rick's voice. But he's acting like Jerry, but then he's acting like Rick in like a same sentence. That's really hard to follow when you don't have any visual cues, which I think, going back to Night Family, was one of the things that they were talking about at the panel. They wanted the glowing eyes. They wanted to make sure that you knew, the viewer, that they were switching to the Night Family when Summer it was like, oh, it's Night Summer now. Yeah. Her eyes switched instantly, so you would have that cue to kind of like ground you to understand what's going on. There was not such a grounding for this episode.
Absolutely, yeah. And outside of maybe like, no, I was gonna say they messed up their hairs, but I think that was just to show that neither one of them was authentically Jerry or Rick. They were some sort of mix between the two. That's your visual. That's your visual that you get for this episode. I have in the show notes is Genius Random. We could discuss it, or we could get into some other topics. So why? Bits. Just let us know in the comments. Send us an email what you think, if Genius is random or not. We'll talk about rake situations in our favorite bits. A few things. Most of these just like random quotes or things from the episode that I particularly enjoyed. But starting off, and I kind of mentioned it in that cold open, the immediate deaths after they swapped minds. Every time I watch it, just like it's so funny and sad at the same time, like how ill-equipped they are to be in each other's shoes, so to speak. Like Rick is just the existential dread of having to deal with Jerry's brain for even seconds. Immediately pushes him over the edge. He can't handle it. He has to end it all. And then Jerry's attempt to operate Rick's body with all of the, upgrades and cybernetics and things like that, he just screws it up immediately to his own demise.
Yeah, it's like going from Windows 11 to MS-DOS and being like, how do I start up a program? Oh,
where's the mouse?
gorillas.exe. Like that's the game. Oh, and then on the opposite end of opposite end of the spectrum. Oh God, my light went off. No, that's not applicable to the actual
For the
episode.
audio listener, Brandon
Audio.
accidentally turned his lights off.
But the opposite end of the spectrum is like loading gorillas on like if you have any old games and you put it on like a new operating system where like everything is like super speed and it's like because the processor is just so much faster that everything is working too fast and it screws
You
everything
have
up.
to create an emulator to be able to play something so
Yeah.
old because
An emulator to make it go slower so that it'll go the speed that it needs to go on your processor. Man, we're showing our IT cred here.
Look at us. Look at us. Who'd have thought? One of the group of gangsters that ends up kidnapping Morty,
Chomsky.
Chuxley, I think.
I don't know why I keep saying Chomsky.
Chomsky, yeah. He's trying to explain who Rick is to these other goons, and at one point he refers to him as a chaotic neutral sci-fi guy, and that's my new favorite way to describe Rick. I love it so much.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. That's great. You have a lot of notes here that I'm like going through. I'm like, okay.
I kind of remember that. I kind of remember that one.
I kind of remember that.
Where it says you're a half Jerry. That's because they both of the Jerricks use that insult on each other. You're a half Jerry. No, you're a half Jerry. Like I don't know. I thought it was fun.
The part that I loved is them trying to both do the Taken thing, and then like they're arguing back and forth, and then they both say the line at the same time, and then they're arguing about like, you know how long it takes me to make this mystique, like anything with Taken, like good luck. I'm a fan of Liam Neeson's, you know.
Yeah. Another great film reference from this episode happens when they're in the criminal restaurant, and Rick's body is trying to access all of his implants, and so he bears down and initiates the Conehead implant, which on its own is like a cheap throwaway gag. But when combined with showing them being able to work together, and he creates a Conehead missile that ends up impaling poor old Chuxley. Yeah, that was great. And Rick's face as he emerges he's just, I don't know, full of joy. It's a great bit.
So far, what I'll say is Gene, who we are introduced not too long ago, right? He's been
around a little bit, but not as
in the
featured.
first 2 episodes. Yeah,
Yes, a lot of airtime.
So when Jerry and Rick, they go on to do their burger and fries adventures, they leave this note for the family, and they talk about how Jerry wanted to leave a note, Rick didn't. It would have been to Jerry to leave a note. It would have been to Rick not to leave a note. So here's a note that's written that's poorly thought out. And then Gene comes to the window. He's like, "Hey, did you guys get a note?" And his note is very long.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good.
That cracked me up. I also liked when they found the note, how Summer's like, "Should we read it in Rick's voice or Dad's voice?"
I like the whole Beth thing where she's like, "You can't come in or touch me until we figure this out." And they're both like, "Oh," both of them are like, "Ooh, no, oh, what do you take us for?" Which is like, good. Let's not go into that.
What's funny is they go, "Oh no, what do you take us for?" And then both look at each other and immediately get to work. So it's like the Rick side of like, "Oh, that's gross," and then the Jerry side of like, we got a job to do. Like this is motivation. We need to get this done. There's also like a line that Rick says at some point where she's like, I can't figure out how much of you is my dad and how much of you is my husband or whatever. And he's like, oh, I've been to that part of the internet or something like that. And it's very quick, but it's pretty funny. Moving on after an ad break, then we get into like this epic chase scene with burger and fries, right? And it starts with two guys who are just carrying a pane of glass, and one of them's talking about who'd have thought that the Make-A-Wish kid would just want a giant piece of glass or whatever, and then they smash right through it. Like I don't know, like they had to add more stakes to them breaking the glass, so it's a Make-A-Wish kid's glass. Yeah, I don't know. That was funny.
When Jerricky is in his full final form, and Morty Summer daughter wife, you are safe now.
Yeah,
Jerrick,
yeah. Not Beth, daughter wife.
I wanna shout out to Ian and Chris Parnell for like having the voiceovers, so where they're talking at the same time, at the same cadence, at the same pace, at the same tone, to be able to get that. Like I'm interested to know like what the process of doing that was. Like if one person recorded it, they heard it, and then like, okay, now I'm going to copy that exact type of tone and cadence. I'd be interested to see something like that.
Yeah,
but I always thought that was.
When we talked to Chris, one of the questions we asked is, have you ever like recorded scenes with anybody else that you're, in a scene with? And typically, him and Sarah were saying that typically no, they just record their lines, they record a bunch of takes of their lines, and then that's all edited together into what we see in the episode. I almost wonder if that was an opportunity where they're like, all right, let's get them both together.
Yeah.
And see if we can have them, because you know how like matching is a lot easier when you're with someone or doing it live. I wonder if that's something where they attempted to get them into a studio together or something to record that. And
I do know they're ADR, in DaVinci Resolve, like they have the ADR stuff. I know Pro Tools probably has it too, where like it's like a segment of audio, and it just repeats over and over again, repeats over and over again, repeats over and over again, and then like you have that, and then you're like, repeats over and over again, 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 right? But then like having the Rick voice or the Jerry voice doing that, and just like trying to match that tone for it until it's like, okay, perfect, cool, next line. But anyway.
And the fact that they probably had to rush through some of these early episodes with the new actors, like that they're able to get that done is impressive stuff. Did you catch the subtle Donkey Kong reference when Jerricky is fighting the thugs in the room where everything is flammable?
I didn't catch that.
So he runs up like an incline, and there's a bunch of barrels up there, and he starts rolling barrels down the ramp, and they're like jumping over them, and then at the top, Jerricky like beats his chest. It's subtle, but I definitely think it's a Donkey Kong reference.
Okay, all right, yeah, I did.
Because who else throws barrels down incline platforms
and beats their chest?
Yeah,
Jerricky
exactly.
and Donkey Kong. The fact that Chuxley comes back, Travis, with a hole in it, with a hole in his chest, is like, is that a reveal, or has he always had the?
Did he always have that? I don't know. I'm just seeing this guy for the first time.
But then him dying because he's what is he? Something.
Did
about
you get
work.
shot? Nah, just my stitches weren't set. I'm just. What does he sound like? I'm too aggressive or something. I'm like too.
No, he talks. He's like he lives for his work or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that, and I like that his final dying is Jerricky gives him a hamburger. He's like, "Oh, thank you. How old is this?" and then he dies.
Yeah. On the way home from being rescued, Jerricky is flying the spaceship. All the rest of the family is sitting quietly in the back. Summer asks if they can listen to some music, or at this point, I would even take a podcast. Which listeners of this show know that podcasts aren't all bad, right? They're great for a long commute across the galaxy.
They don't all
They can be an enjoyable way to spend your time.
You don't hear the symphony of atoms dying across the stars or whatever.
No, I don't. No. And then the memory Rick callbacks. These might have been in contention for best worst parts of the episode for me. But there's when they gain their separate consciousness again, and Rick actually talks about how there's a 30-year-old version of me that's been keeping our egos in check. I thought that was awesome. So call back to what was it, what is that episode, the bird person episode called?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Eternal shine of
it's the bird person episode. But call back again to that memory version of Rick, and then the post credits tag where he gets caught in Jerry's mind, and Jerry's only understanding of how mechanical things work is with springs and cogs. Every bit of that I just thought was fantastic.
Well, yeah. Talking about best and worst parts, Travis. Let's go ahead and go into your best and worst parts of the episode. So the first thing here is burger and fries chase scene.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this as, I don't know, maybe a kid of the 80s or something like that, but just like they're running through like a planet that takes some notes from Miami or something in their Hawaiian shirts. I thought it was just a fun sequence.
It felt like Al Pacino Scarface ish.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Kind of Magnum PI or something, like Hawaii 5-0 esque. Just sort of action sequence.
Yeah. One of us always gets shot.
Yeah, chest bump. Hiya! Like, what was there?
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought that was funny. I thought that it was interesting and a very good way of showing them fully becoming at peace with embracing the new versions of themselves that they had created.
The second thing we have here is the rake gag to reset their brains. Now, before we say anything about this, Travis, I don't know if this is your best or worst part, but to me, it immediately takes me back to the Simpsons Cape Fear episode, where Sideshow Bob keeps stepping on rakes, and like whack, whack. And then later in the episode, he steps on a random rake. It's like, and so as soon as Jerricky gets hit in the face with the rake, to me, that was, I don't know. I was like, that's a good resolution to this episode.
I thought it was phenomenal, and I'll tell you why, because it was set up from the very beginning of the episode.
Yeah.
Like, people stepping on rakes and getting hit in the face is one of the oldest animation gags there is. I mean, Foghorn Leghorn and like Elmer Fudd, like old school Looney Tunes and things like that. You had that happen all the time, right? And so I just picture somewhere in the writer's room someone being like, I don't know if it was like, all right, we have this whole idea of them merging, but how do we unmerge them? Well, maybe we do like a classic trope, like an anvil falls on their heads, or, oh, what if they get hit in the face with a rake? Yeah, but why would a rake be out there? And then just through a series of events, they create this whole subplot throughout the whole episode where it's like a whole rake situation from the very beginning that ends up being the thing that gets them out of their Jerricky, condition. But Yeah, I don't know. I think it's great. I think the way that it ties the whole episode together and kind of creates that resolution, I love it. I absolutely think it's great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're on the same page with that. I think the worst part, if we had to define a worst part for this episode, it would be that on initial watch, and we talked about this already, that it was kind of confusing about what was going on.
Sure. Yeah.
Because those cues don't exist to tell us like when it's a Rick or when it's a Jerry talking. So I think that was the main thing on rewatch. Okay, cool. I know what to expect. I know where things are going. But that initial watch, I'm like, my brain.
And again, I don't know if this is me running, outdated hardware or what, but
Sure.
I feel like that happens quite a bit in Rick and Morty episodes for me,
Okay.
where like sometimes the initial premise, I'm like, okay, wait, what's going on? Okay, I've got it. And then by the time I've like figured that out, we've moved on because it's only like a 22-minute episode, and we're moving on in the story, so that by the time I go back and watch it a second time, now I understand what they're setting up, so then I can appreciate it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which is why I always recommend people watch the episodes more than once whenever possible.
100%. Yeah. On the Reddit, we have the live episode discussion pieces, right? We have those posts and people talk about them live. And then we have the post episode discussions, and then of course people are posting their own threads on Reddit as days go by. And I think the same thing, like going into like movie criticism, film criticism, TV criticism. You should always, and we've talked about this on the show before. You should always watch what you enjoy more than once. Like once just to watch it, to just enjoy it. Another time to actually get some more critical analysis of it, and then maybe like other times to get like more finite details, the more because like if you're, we did this for Walking Dead, if you're not enjoying it first, then you're missing out on the experience. So heavily recommend any of Rick and Morty episodes. Like give them another chance. I'll even Slut Dragon episode. It's still not my favorite, but on rewatch,
it's grown on me a little bit with the rewatches. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird.
I can't lie.
All right, those are our thoughts on the second episode of season 7, the Jerrick Trap. If you like what we said, if you dislike what we said, we want to hear from you either way. If there's anything that we missed, your favorite bits, or anything else from the episode, please let us know. Send us a tweet. You can put a comment on this if you're watching on YouTube. But now we're going to get into some listener suggestions and short outs. A couple of short outs real quickly. Pink Duck Princess, you typically watches on YouTube, but is always good for a comment or two. Thank you so much for coming back for season 7, and hope you're enjoying our takes from the YouTube comments. Also, a little bit of chatter on our Discord, which I'm going to be honest, Brandon, I don't know if our Discord is open to the public. I don't know if it's a Patreon only thing at this point.
It was, yeah. Yeah.
But it exists. It's out there. Some folks, Nikki Chuck and Zachmo. Nikki Chuck saying that they really enjoyed the premiere, and you guys 100% correct opinions on the pod. I felt the same way about the voices, nearly indistinguishable except for Wayne. And the highlights/lowlights. I guess I need to see Ernest Goes to Camp to fully grok the lawnmower.
Yeah, you
grok
do.
the lawnmower runner. I don't know what grok means.
I think it.
Might have been a typo.
There's like a Nintendo 64 game, Turok the dinosaur.
Oh, I played it. Dinosaur Hunter. Turok.
Yeah. Pretty good. But yeah, Ernest Goes to Camp. There's also a really good scene where they're fighting off the evil businessmen who are trying to take over the camp, and they shoot a bunch of turtles with parachutes. And while that's happening, the Turtles Happy Together is playing in the background. So it's great song, great movie. Ernest Goes to Camp. Okay.
Phenomenal. Satchmo says, I noticed more of a difference with the voices in the trailer than in the episode itself.
Yeah.
And then you go online, and you see all these chronically online people that say the voices are just absolute garbage, which is crazy to say. And Nikki responding that obviously only the most dedicated, highest IQ Rick and Morty fans would be able to tease out those auditory subtleties.
Agreed.
This
and
is the high quality conversation. I love it. I love that you guys are in there. You're sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah.
We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for still being active in the community.
And your points are heard, and they kind of echo what we're saying is that if nobody knew that there was a change of voices, they wouldn't have said anything. So I do honestly believe that. Also, Zashmo in the actual general chat, Travis, over at October 12th, 2023, saying really enjoyed the most recent Apathetic Enthusiasm.
Woo!
Also excited for the Rick and Morty pods. We don't care about Rick and Morty pods. Apathetic Enthusiasm. Anyways,
Hey, podcast.
Thank you. So of course, thank you to patrons. Thank you for chatting with us. Thank you for hitting us up on X and everywhere else. And most importantly, thank you for being fellow fans of Rick and Morty with us. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We really do appreciate you. And any feedback you give us is more than welcome.
Yeah, if you are just finding us for the first time, if you've gone through 6 seasons scared and alone, but you now have found unity and you are watching season 7 with us. First off, thank you for being here. But also take a minute, rate, review, share this podcast with the people that you know. Helps other folks find the podcast and all those things. We appreciate that you're here. And that's it for this week. Next week, new episode. They're just going to keep on coming. So make sure you're subscribed. And until next time, I'm Travis.
And I'm Brandon. Goodbye. I was gonna do the ba-bwa-da-ba-da-bwa-da-bwa, and so I almost did like, and I'm Brandon. I almost did that.
I'm Brandon.
Okay, whatever. I'm out of here.